I want to introduce Mr. Coggins. He is the teacher for the AP American Government class. He has a list of credentials. Without a card, I said I would forget them, so I'm going to let him introduce himself. Thank you.
Thank you, George.
You know what? Let's do one thing first. How about if we all stand for a Pledge of Allegiance? As soon as I turned and saw that flag, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Coggins.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Again, my name is Anthony Coggins. I am the AP American Government teacher here at Holly High School. I am the co-department advisor, and I am also the advisor for Rho Kappa, which is the National Social Studies Honor Society chapter here at Holly High School. I'm proud to be a part of this community because I have some outstanding students, which, by the way, many of you are in the audience. Extra credit for you. Very good. And we thank you for the help that you've put in. I've spoken with many of the students, some of them my AP students from last year, some of them students from this year, on the questions that we should ask our guests this evening. We have many wonderful people running for office, and regardless of the partisan side that you may be on, every one of these people need to be credited, because my favorite TV show as a political scientist, I guess you could say, was always West Wing. Some say it's not realistic. Okay, fine. But there is one statement that came out of that. Decisions are made by those who show up. All of these people have chosen to show up. All of these people have chosen to be a part of society and to put themselves out there. And so no matter whether you are a Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, Green Party, or one of the many other political parties, we thank you for putting yourselves out there to help serve all of our communities, and you deserve a round of applause. Thank you very much. This is the format that we are going to use this evening. The candidates will be invited up to the stage for a specific position, whether they are running for the United States Congress, our state Congress, or one of our local offices. The candidates will all be introduced by name. They will all be given 2 minutes to make a statement from here at the podium. And then after that, one of these two outstanding students, we have Tim Kinnamon, we have Emily Sanders, two of my AP government students who last year both scored a 5 on the AP test, as high as you can get. They will be asking the questions to the candidates this evening. After that is finished, we will thank our candidates, we will invite them to take their seats in the audience, and we will bring up our next round of candidates. Again, this will continue until we have gone through all 7 or 8 sections that we have tonight. If there are no questions, it is my pleasure to welcome to the stage, running for United States House of Representatives from the 8th District, representing the Democratic Party, ladies and gentlemen, we invite Miss Elisa Slotkin to the stage. And we had early confirmation. I am not sure if he made it or not, but we would like to welcome, if he is here, from the Libertarian Party, Mr. Brian Ellison. I do not see Mr. Ellison. Okay. Ms. Slotkin, the podium is yours. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you. All right. Good evening. Thank you for coming. This is great, and I can tell you I've done a bunch of forums so far, and this is the only one where the students made the choices, so I cannot wait for the questions. My name is Elisa Slotkin. I'm running for the U.S. Congress in the 8th District. We're sitting in the 8th District. It's all of North Oakland County, Rochester, Rochester Hills, Lake Orion, Clarkson, Holly, all the way through Livingston County, Brighton and Howell, and then all of Ingham County, Lansing, East Lansing, Michigan State. So it's a big district, and I actually live just down the road on Tucker Road. We have a family farm here since 1956. Some of you may know the farm. It's a big red farmhouse. My family had a meat company called High Grade Foods, and we bought the farm in 1956. It used to have, I think, about 300 head of Black Angus. We now lease our farmland to a soybean farmer. And I lived here at the farm when I was a little girl, till about 5 or 6 years old. And then my parents got divorced and I moved around Oakland County. But my professional experience is exclusively in national security, and that is because of the anniversary we just had about a month ago, 9/11. I had just moved to New York City. I had just started my second day of grad school when 9/11 happened. And I'm sure all of you remember exactly where you were and what you were doing when 9/11 happened, if you were old enough. For me, that was an in or out moment. And I knew I was going to do national security as a career. I was recruited by the CIA to be a Middle East analyst, and within a year I was on my first tour in Iraq. I was voluntold to go to Iraq. So I put on my body armor, I was trained in a Glock and an M4, and I would go around with our military and our diplomats trying to understand the terrorist groups that were shooting at US forces and plotting against the US homeland. I did 3 tours in Iraq, and in between, something very important to me as a person and as a candidate is I was working for whoever was my commander-in-chief. I worked under the Bush administration, I worked under the Obama administration. I worked 14 years in national security with 3 tours in Iraq, and no one ever asked me if I was a Democrat or Republican, because it just didn't matter, because you're focused on the mission of protecting US forces, protecting the US homeland. So what's the point of asking what someone's party was? And I think it's that mission focus that we have lost in our domestic politics. So I met my husband on my 3rd tour. He's a career Army officer and Apache pilot for 30 years in the US Army. And I have 2 stepdaughters, both in service. One's a brand new lieutenant in the Army, just reassigned to Alaska. And the other one is a brand new physician for the VA. So we're a service family. And the clearest reason I can give you for why I ever thought of running, because I hadn't before recently, is that I believe the tenor and tone of politics right now is fundamentally unbecoming of the country that I served and the country that we all love. So I started thinking about running. Oh, sure, we can clap for that. I started thinking about running, but then I was reticent to get in because I'd never been to a political event. I had never made a donation to any political party. My husband was an Army officer, so we'd always been very careful and bipartisan. Money in politics was really the thing that was keeping me out of it. I did not understand how bad campaign finance laws were in our country. But I decided to get in May of 2017, and that's because the healthcare vote specifically. Healthcare is very personal to me. My mother died in 2011 from ovarian cancer, and when she was diagnosed, she did not have healthcare. She had struggled her whole life with healthcare because she had breast cancer as a very young mom. I was 4 years old, she was 31. And she survived, but for the rest of her life, she had what we call a pre-existing condition. So when she lost her job in 2002 here in Oakland County, she lost her insurance. And because she had a pre-existing condition, she could not afford the private insurance that was on offer. So she went for 5.5 years with no insurance, no checkup, nothing. In 2008, my brother and I helped her get insurance. It was $1,000 a month with a $10,000 deductible. Her highest bill, higher than her rent. And in July of 2009, without us knowing, she let it lapse. She paid another bill. And in September of 2009, she walked into Henry Ford and was diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer. So I'm sure many of you know what it's like to have a loved one get a terminal diagnosis. Your life, as you know it, explodes. And that same week and that same month that my life was exploding was the same week and the same month we spent preparing the paperwork for her to file for bankruptcy. So when I turned on the TV in May of 2017 and I saw the House of Representatives, they were voting to repeal protections, particularly for people with pre-existing conditions. There was a Rose Garden ceremony, it was carried live on TV, and I could see Mike Bishop, the man I am now running against, in the 3rd or 4th row, and he was smiling and beaming and proud that he had voted to repeal those protections. And something for me broke. And I turned to my husband and I said, no, you don't get to do this. I have seen this before, both of us had. In the military context, this is called dereliction of duty. It is a fireable offense, and we decided that day that we were going to try and fire him. So the things that I hear about the most, and then I'll turn it over because I know my time must be up, the things I hear about the most in our district are the things that are squeezing the middle class, right? So the cost of healthcare and prescription drugs, the cost of tuition for all the students in the room, and then our infrastructure. We all know about the roads, but our water infrastructure, right? I think we need to understand what's happening in our state, separate from Flint. Every single week there's a new community that's popping up with a new problem with their water, lead or PFAS, the Huron River, you can't eat the fish. And I believe that in Michigan we have to have once-in-a-generation investment in our infrastructure. So that's something I believe in. Lastly, I will just say, My passion project is restoring integrity to government. Because I knock on doors every day, including here in Holly, where people proudly tell me they don't vote. They open the door and I'll say, are you gonna vote? Who are you gonna vote? And they'll say, I don't vote. The system is broken. Both parties are corrupt. No one represents me. They're all bought and sold by the big corporations. And I will tell you, as a national security person, if people are backing away from our democracy, the greatest gift to governance the world has ever seen, that is a threat to our system. That is a threat to our country. So I think we can restore integrity in two ways, particularly on our ballot in November. Number one, we need to get rid of political gerrymandering. Either party, right? We have a very carefully crafted district here in the 8th district, right? Rochester doesn't have a lot to do with Lansing. Those two communities don't spend a lot of time together. Our district is so gerrymandered, we have Michigan State University and Oakland University, but not the dorms at Oakland University. They just cut around the dorms, right? So we have the opportunity to vote yes on Proposition 2 to take the drawing of the lines away from any politician of any party and put it in the hands of a commission of citizens. So I'm a big believer in that. And then number two, campaign finance reform. I made the decision in January, I am not taking corporate PAC dollars, not a dime. So nothing from a big corporate political action committee. That's in contrast to my opponent who's taken over $1 million of corporate PAC money over the course of his career. I didn't want anyone to question who I was voting for, right? When I cast my vote. And I have been one of the few handful of candidates running this cycle who wrote a letter to the Democratic leadership in Washington saying that the first bill of the new House should be campaign finance reform. Money in politics is terrible. It is insidious. So I will stop there. I want to get to the questions. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being engaged citizens. Thank you for caring about what happens in your country. I believe it is just time for a new generation of leaders who thinks differently, who works harder, and never forgets that they are public servants. So thank you for the opportunity.
Ms. Slotkin, I have a microphone for you.
You are free to sit or stand, whatever you wish.
At this time, ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased to introduce the president of our Rho Kappa National Social Studies Honor Society, soon to be graduate of Holly High School, class of 2019, Mr. Tim Kinnamon.
Now, you sort of answered my first question a little bit in your introduction, so I'll go a little off script for this first one. You make it into the House of Representatives. At the end of your 2-year tenure, what specifically would you like to say, especially in a re-election campaign?
Yep.
What specifically would you like to say, this is something I've accomplished in our government?
Yep, that's a great question. So I would love to hope that in a year and a half time, I'm standing on this stage and I'm talking to you about a couple of things that are fundamentally different from our current representative, both in style and in substance. So style, that's the easy part, right? So first of all, I have committed to doing a town hall every 3 months in the district. From now until my next campaign and my next campaign. You cannot represent people if you don't know the issues that are affecting them, and people have to be able to tell you what's going on in their lives. I have committed to making my schedule public. It's a simple thing, publishing your weekly schedule when you're a congressperson. But that is the greatest representation of how you prioritize your time. And if you're meeting with a bunch of lobbyists, people should know. If you're meeting with constituents and doing work on legislation, people should know. And then number 3, I have committed to doing a bunch of things that I hope will bring Democrats and Republicans closer together and closer to working together. So for instance, congressional members of Congress, they go on these trips to Iraq or Afghanistan to go visit and see what's happening over there. And they fly on military planes, right? And I know I was at the Pentagon approving those planes. If I'm a congressperson, I will commit to only going on bipartisan congressional delegations so that Democrats and Republicans work together, sit together, travel together, wait for a delayed flight together so that we start to build back those human relationships that actually are the things that get things done. So that's style. Substance. Number 1, I think the first bill, as I said, in Congress should be a campaign finance reform bill. Right now, if anyone in this room wants to give me $15 as a donation, I need your name, your address, and your occupation. But if you want to give $15 million to a super PAC for attack ads, you can be completely anonymous. I think that's crazy. I think that's bonkers. So there are a bunch of things that we need to do to level the playing field with money in politics, particularly on things like limits. And then the next one we have to do is healthcare. I want to be able, we are not settled as a nation on how we provide healthcare to our citizens. And I want to be a part of a bipartisan group that shuts out the media, puts their heads down, and figures out how we are going to make healthcare affordable to everyone, right? To everyone. I believe everyone deserves access to healthcare they can afford. How we do it is our generation's problem to solve. But I want to come back and know that in a year and a half, we look back and say, we actually made some real progress on healthcare.
Our second question. How would your views on gun control benefit the citizens of this district specifically?
Sure. So I grew up in a gun-owning family. I was trained on a Glock and an M4 semi-automatic to go to Iraq, and my husband, as an Army officer, obviously carried a weapon every day that he was deployed. So we're a family that believes in the Second Amendment. But it is because of that training that I believe we need to have an honest conversation about gun safety. And I think we can do that in a couple of different ways. First of all, I think people who have experience with guns are in the best position to actually facilitate this conversation, because people have gone to their corners. Very polarizing issue, right? I think the first thing we need to do is talk about universal background checks and closing loopholes, right? Right now, if you want to buy a gun in Dunham's, then you got to go through a background check. Just like I did before the CIA put me out on a range, before my husband did when the Army trained him. A simple background check and making sure that someone on the terrorist no-fly list, a domestic abuser, or someone who's mentally ill can't get a weapon. So the same checks that you go through in Dunham's, I think you should go through if you go to a gun show, if you buy a weapon on the internet. And I think that will make us safer, since we know there are people who are dangerous, who have mental illness, and who should not be anywhere near a weapon. Secondly, I personally don't believe that material that makes any weapon a fully automatic weapon needs to be sold in the United States. So bump stocks, extended magazines, certain trigger mechanisms. But the most important thing is actually having a conversation. And I think what we've seen after all of these school shootings that have happened for years, we have still not had one real conversation about gun safety. And I just don't think that's looking forward, facing forward into the issue. And so in terms of what it would do for this district, I think this district is a perfect example of how responsible gun ownership is a positive thing. And we can set a positive example for people. I think that we need to get out of this media-induced polarization and have a real conversation led by people who responsibly use firearms.
Our third and final question, is climate change real and man-made? If yes, how should America try to stop it? If no, should America continue pursuing a green thumb?
Sure. So I believe in science. I believe that climate change is real and that it is man-made. And the reason I feel strongly about this is because at my job at the Pentagon, I helped co-author the first report that the military ever did on the effects of climate change on the US military. And we needed to do this report because with changing weather and changing temperatures, a lot is changing for the US military. Our bases, particularly those that are near sea level, our ranges are becoming too hot to use. The melting of the Arctic is changing what strategic weapons the Russians are putting into the Arctic. And if we have 3 superstorms instead of 1 per year, well, that means a lot of different things for the National Guard, who gets called up when there's a national weather emergency. So the military takes climate change as a planning factor. It just understands it as fact and is planning accordingly, and therefore I don't have to be a scientist to believe other scientists. I believe it is real and we should be planning for it. That includes in Michigan. That includes for our farmers. So yes, I believe in it. Yes, I believe it's man-made, and yes, I believe we need to be working on mitigating it. I would call for Michigan to have a 10-year plan to mitigate the impact of climate change.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Elisa Slotkin. We now move on to some of our state offices. It is my pleasure to welcome to the floor, representing Representing the Democratic Party, running for state representative of the 51st District, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. David Lawson.
Well, good evening, everyone. My name is David Lawson. I am the Democratic candidate for the State House here in the 51st District, which covers both Genesee and Oakland counties. As Elisa mentioned, as the 8th Congressional District is wonderfully gerrymandered, so is the 51st District. It includes 9 townships, 2 cities, 3 villages, 8 school districts in 2 different counties. And so we have been aggressively knocking on doors since about the middle of May. I'm the former mayor of the city of Linden, where I served for 12 years, 6 years before that on the city council. I worked at the University of Michigan for 16 years, both on the Ann Arbor and Flint campus, and taught on the Ann Arbor campus in the School of Education as an adjunct lecturer. If you remember the cartoon about how a bill becomes a law, I'm only a bill on Capitol Hill. That was the class I taught with 3 other colleagues in the School of Education, and was geared towards undergraduate students at U of M. As well as high school students throughout the state of Michigan, about how to improve the legislation that's coming out of Lansing on a semester-by-semester basis. And so those students would craft proposals, they would get voted upon by their own colleagues, and then we would have a hearing at the state capitol with legislators, and they would testify in front of a hearing. And so it was a great way to take what they learned in the classroom in the applied way into how legislation is actually made. I was the Director of Government Relations at the University of Michigan Flint for 9 years and worked to represent my campus with the Michigan Legislature and the Governor's Office as well as the U.S. Congress. So there's really 4 priorities for me as I walk into this race, wanting to serve the residents of the 51st District and the state legislature. It's an open seat this year. Joe Graves is the incumbent and he is termed out. So the 4 things really, first off, is community revenue sharing. As a former mayor, I've seen firsthand the cuts that we have taken from the governor's office and the legislature and being underfunded in revenue sharing. Not only by this governor, but the previous governor. We have lost about just over $8 billion to communities and townships and cities and villages across our great state. Here in the 51st District, that equates to just almost $16 million. Holly Township has been underfunded $2.6 million. Can you imagine what the township could have used those funds for? To repair local roads, playgrounds, and so forth, and buy the needed equipment for police and fire departments. And the same is true for Groveland, Rose, and Holly Village. Secondly, I want to work to invest in our K-12 district. My wife teaches at Flint Southwestern Academy in the Flint School District, so I get to see from her perspective the impact on education is she teaches her students. And we need to raise the educational attainment level and the retention rates of our students from year to year, basically. So I want to work with them to reinvest into the school buildings. And finally, for those high school seniors in the audience tonight, I'm proposing what I call the Michigan Commitment that would allow high school seniors to be able to afford, attend, and graduate from skilled trade programs, 2-year and 4-year degree programs with 0 debt. In exchange, those students agree to stay in Michigan for 8 years afterwards. So we can use that creative class to attract the investments into our state. If you remember last year and earlier this year, Amazon last year said they weren't going to come to Michigan because we didn't have mass transit, we don't have a highly educated workforce. The U.S. Army said the same thing this year about where they were going to locate their Futures Command. We don't have a highly educated workforce. And so we need to raise those educational attainment rates so that we'll look more like Minnesota and less like Mississippi over the next decade. It's going to take time and investment, but I believe investing in the youth of tomorrow to be those next leaders that will be sitting on this stage and running for office in our great state. And finally, as I've knocked on over collectively through our campaign with all the volunteers that we've had, we've knocked on over 15,000 doors since about the middle of May. One of the biggest issues I hear from seniors is the Republican pension tax that was passed in 2012 as part of the $1 billion tax cut this state gave away to corporations at the expense of seniors, K-12, community colleges, and higher education institutions. I think one of the first votes, if elected in November, is we're going to repeal the Republican pension tax. because it's unfair to ask the seniors who have saved and planned for their retirement to pay for a tax that they didn't have planned for. And I have talked to hundreds of seniors who have lost anywhere from $500 up to $4,000 a year. Those that were also grandfathered out of the system so they don't have to pay, but as we progress year to year, more seniors are going to fall into that trap. So we need to repeal the Republican pension tax. My name's David Lossie, and I'm the Democratic candidate for the state rep, and I'm looking forward to the questions posed by both Tim and Emily. Thank you.
At this time, it is my pleasure to welcome Ms. Emily Sanders, soon-to-be graduate of Holly High School.
Okay, our first question today is going to be, how do you plan to encourage new businesses and business growth in Michigan?
That's a perfect question. I think part of it is, as I mentioned in my opening comments, I'm all about investing in communities and people. If we can invest through revenue sharing and get back to where we should have been 16 years ago with revenue sharing and reinvest the $8 billion into Holly Village and Fenton and Linden and the other 500 communities across our great state, we'll be able to use that to attract investment by businesses. Businesses don't come to Michigan because of tax cuts. They come because of the aesthetics of the community they're going to be located in. What is the talent pool around that? Will they have the workers? And what will their employees do when they're not working full-time? Are there the amenities that communities offer? I'm the current chair of the Shiawassee River Water Trail Coalition, and our goal is to have the Shiawassee River from Holly all the way to Chesaning, all 88 miles of it, designated as a national water trail by the National Park Service. We're awaiting for final designation, hopefully this month, by the U.S. Department of the Interior. It's held up a little bit, but we hope that we'll break that log jam to make it happen. And that's going to be a nice amenity because we have seen along the river system in our communities of Holly, Fenton, Linden, Argentine, Byron, Chesaning, Owasso, and so forth, and Corunna, the number of paddlers that are coming into our communities for recreational purposes. And that's economic development for our communities. That's hotel stays, that's gasoline stops, that's restaurants and so forth. And folks who have kayaks, my wife and I, we have 3 of them as well, have higher disposable incomes and they're willing to spend locally. So we've, through the last 5 years of the Water Trail Plan, we've been attracting visitors into our communities along the river system, in the 3-county system. So that's part of it. The other half is investing in you. As you graduate Holly High School next year and decide to go to college or a skilled trade program, we want to invest in you so that you can afford to go, that you can graduate and keep your debt zero, and have you stay in Michigan and not move to Chicago. Because we know if we can keep enough of you here, we'll create an amazing talent pool from skilled trades all the way through a 4-year degree program that will attract the investment. And maybe Amazon will take a second look at us down the road.
Our next question was going to be about education, but you already answered that one, so we're going to move on. What is your stance on Proposal 1 and recreational marijuana? Would you support a different proposal with more rigorous guidelines?
So I've always been a supporter of medical marijuana because I know that the folks that suffer from some of those debilitating diseases have relief from marijuana use that way. This proposal, I'm not crazy about it, but I think it's going to pass next month anyways. And so it's going to be incumbent upon the legislature to make sure that we enact policies and laws that deal with that specifically. I've talked to a number of residents on the doors who have concerns about it. I talked to a voter today, about children. She lives next door to somebody who has a medical marijuana card, and they're smoking in the backyard. And the smoke waffles over the fence, and so what is that going to be like? So it's going to be incumbent upon the legislature to have firsthand knowledge about it and understand the impact at the local level. And when the medical marijuana issue passed a few years ago, our community was really, we were resistant about the distribution of it. And so we put a moratorium on planning until they got settled in the court system about how are these distribution centers going to be set up in terms of planning and zoning. Once that got all settled out, we finally moved forward and would allow it. And that was an issue for a lot of communities across the state to figure it out. The other challenge along with this is the legal statutes and criminal statutes with marijuana from a misdemeanor to a civil infraction. They maybe have to change. And of course, we're going to have the Congress talk about, taking it off as a Schedule I drug, because we've seen what's going on in Colorado, and then you have different, the FBI and the state police taking different interpretations of what they can do, in terms of arresting power and so forth. So it's not settled yet, but I think it'll pass. Prop 1 will, and we'll have to figure it out next year in the legislature.
Okay, and then our final question is going to be, what is your stance on Proposal 2 in nonpartisan redistricting? Would the cost be worth the effort?
Yes. I mean, I think if you look at our district, the 51st, my friend David Robertson, who's the current state senator here in the 14th district, you look at his gerrymandered district and a little easement that connects 2 townships together, and you look at the 8th congressional district and the way it's been manufactured, I think it's a problem on both sides of the aisle. Democrats have gerrymandered districts, Republicans have gerrymandered districts, and it's time to have districts that represent the population and the citizens that they serve. So I think I'm supportive of Prop 2. I think it will pass. I think the voters are smart enough to realize we need districts that are representative of the citizens that they serve, instead of being stretched out so strangely across different territories. So I'm very supportive, and I hope it does pass.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. David Lossing. Ladies and gentlemen, our current senator, Mr. David Robertson, to speak for a few moments.
Thank you very much for inviting me up. As was mentioned, I'm State Senator David Robertson, and I'm here this evening on behalf of Michael Mueller. Michael had another event this evening, but he did not want to go unrepresented here this evening. Before I speak on Michael's behalf, let me just take a moment to say to all of you what an honor and privilege it has been for me to serve as your state senator for the past nearly 8 years. I've tried to do the best I can to represent your interests at all times and to do a good job in Lansing on all the issues of the day that we confront at the state capitol. And so thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to serve you as I have. My purpose here this evening is to speak on behalf of Michael Mueller. Michael is not here this evening, but he did want you to know that he appreciates the fact that you're having the event and obviously is interested in having your support. Mike is the Republican candidate for the 51st House District. He is a lifelong Michigan resident. He is a resident of Fenton Township. His family lives in the Linden area. He is, many of you may have met him going door to door, or you've gotten information about him in the past weeks and months. He is, among other things, he is a Navy veteran, served honorably in military service in the Navy. He is a sheriff's deputy, 18 and a half years, in both the Washtenaw and Livingston County Sheriff's Departments, where he is still a sheriff's deputy to this day and is still actively employed while he is also campaigning for the legislature. He is a farmer. His family owns the orchard in Linden. That family farm has been in operation since the 1940s, and he's a third-generation owner of a family farm. And he has a business with his wife, a wedding venue that is built there on the site, and they're actively in small business. What I'm most impressed about with Michael, and what I think you should be impressed about with him as well, is the sincerity with which he is approaching his desire to serve in the legislature. The fact that he comes to the business of running for office with a diverse background of life experiences that we believe, and I believe, will serve him well. He believes that his experience in law enforcement and in small business puts him in a good position to know and understand the interests of this community and wants to represent you. Obviously, he comes to issues from the standpoint of law enforcement, which is his primary occupation, and some issues may be asked him that would speak to that. But I want to stress that there's a genuineness about Mike Mueller that I think recommends him at a time when there's maybe some skepticism about politics and politicians. I think he's He's a fine young man that is deserving of your support. I'm not quite sure of the forum here, in terms of how you're organized. I don't know whether you want me to field questions on Michael's behalf, or what would you like to do?
I think we'd like to hear the candidates speak for themselves. But Senator, we do thank you for coming, sir.
I want to take a few minutes to speak for Michael, and I thank you very kindly for the time that you've given me. Thank you. And I'm enjoying the forum, so thank you very much. Okay, thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Senator David Robertson. We now move on to the next of our state offices, the office of State Senate for the 14th District. I would like to welcome to the stage, please, our current Secretary of State, ladies and gentlemen, representing our Republican Party, Secretary Ruth Johnson, and representing our Democratic Party, I am not sure if she came in a little bit late, but we want to check. We had Ms. Renee Watson. Ms. Watson, thank you.
Secretary Johnson, thank you.
Ladies, what we're going to do, I am going to allow Ms. Johnson to have her couple moments first. Ms. Watson, if you would like to join us, have a seat. Once Secretary Johnson is done, it will be yours, and then we will have our questions from our students.
Well, good evening. It's great to be here. I rarely have a commute as Secretary of State that's only 8 minutes from my home, so this is fabulous. District 14 starts in Waterford, where I grew up, and goes all the way up to the border of Flint. There's 15 communities within that district, but a little known fact, 2 houses in the city of Fenton are in the Holly area, so technically there's 16 of us. I used to be a small business owner. I've also volunteered extensively in my community and for this area. I've been a teacher. I've gotten my degree through K through 9, and I have been very fortunate to be a public servant for the Holly area for decades. And I appreciate that. I can't tell you how much that means to me to be able to not only volunteer, but also be working for you in government. I have to tell you, I go to a lot of these, and I have for a number of years, and this is a pretty good turnout. And I really appreciate you taking time. There's a lot of people that sit on their Barco lounger with their TV remote and complain. But you're actually getting out, listening, learning, and making decisions. I would encourage each one of you to go on Michigan.vote/on our Secretary of State site to look up your ballot. We have 5,000 ballot styles in Michigan, so you and your neighbor might not have the same one. So if you can go on our site, you can see your particular ballot, and you can read not only all the different people that are running, but the ballot initiatives too. I got involved because I got mad, because I hated government, for good reason. The county and the state had okayed one of the largest toxic and hazardous waste sites just down the road here that would have contaminated the water both in Oakland County and Genesee County. I became the co-chair with a friend. Her father was the chair of the Democrat Party. So we made a great team, Chris Maniaci. And we went after it for 3.5 years. This company spent $7.2 million. That gravel pit over there at Grange Hall in Dixie and around Mount Holly is a sole source aquifer where the aquifer actually intersects with the top of the ground. So those contaminants, some of the worst in the world, would have been brought here and would have contaminated our water even in their own scientific reports. We fought, we picketed, we became experts, we worked together, and I'm happy to tell you after 38 years after fighting that, and I went on as a county commissioner and got that out of the county plan. Then I went on to the state and changed the laws so that would never happen again. So 38 years later, it's going to be one of the biggest, best family parks in this part of Michigan. So I want to thank all of you that helped with that effort to stop Stablex from coming here. As your state senator, I already have a history of fighting for this area. I will never stop, and I will never stop fighting fraud. As Secretary of State, I started performance audits, and I also went after 400 crooked car dealers and car dealer parts operations so that we can stop people from being ripped off. I also got subpoena power as a state representative and went after money that was being squandered fraudulently, corruption in our intermediate school districts. In Oakland County, they were using money for a $3,800 per hour fee to the superintendent's son, European river cruises, Las Vegas Casino at the Venetian, Waterford Crystal, limo service, $250 dinners, and our superintendent here in Oakland County was making over $400,000 a year, but only showing $175,000. We need to get the money to our hardworking teachers. We need to get the money into the classrooms, not to have it used fraudulently in ways that hurt our kids. As you know, the intermediate school districts help kids with special needs, but they also help kids that want to get an education in something that might not be a college career path, but actually something that might help in so many other ways in our society and ways that we need so badly. And as adults, I think it's one of our single biggest failings that we have not made sure that every kid can get a good education, so when they go to get a job, they can get a good job to support their family and have a good life. There's nothing more important, I don't think, that we can do right now than making sure our kids get a good education. Even in the Genesee County ISD, that superintendent got permission to put up a rock climbing wall, and they used it with the kids' money for books to learn how to be electricians. So the kids didn't have books to even learn. We have to make sure that fraud and waste doesn't happen in our system. We have jobs right now. I'm told that if you have a commercial driver's license and you can pass the drug test, we're trying to find all these different people out there that are fixing our roads, and we've put $700 million into those recently. They are crumbling. Our bridges are bad. They can't find people to work for $25 an hour because they don't have CDLs, because we haven't trained people. We haven't given them skills. The good news, if you know somebody that wants a job, they can start out at $15 an hour right now to get trained. And then, of course, mechanical engineering, heating, plumbing, electrical, welding. My nephew, who used to live here in Holly, and my brother was on the school board, he went to college at OCC, and he took an elective, and it was to become a welder. Well, he thought he'd just take it so that he would learn. Actually, he'll make more money as a welder than he will when he finishes his 4-year architectural degree, and he will become a welder rather than probably take on his 4-year degree, what he's become a specialist in. So our kids deserve multiple paths to be able to get a good education. And I want to tell you a few things about Michigan, because we hear so much bad, but Michigan is the comeback state of the nation. We had more than 75% of our houses underwater. I was the Oakland County Clerk Register of Deeds, and we never had foreclosures like this, except for in the Great Depression. That was people losing their homes, their extended families, where the kids went to school. They're not just numbers. They mean something. And under the administration we have now, we've brought back 600,000 jobs. Our real estate has gone up 60%, and our unemployment has gone from 14.9% to 4.5%. That's opportunity. That's what we need to continue, and that's what I want to be part of. So again, I want to thank you, because only 1% of 1% of the people get involved like you have to learn so that you know how to vote. And again, if you go on michigan.gov/vote, you can look at your particular ballot so you'll be prepared. Thank you so much for having me here, and I would like to thank the Chamber for everything that you do to make sure we get opportunities to learn about each one of the candidates. Thank you. I also just want to say I have literature out, and it has my phone number on it with one of my volunteers. If you have any questions afterwards, my phone number is right on the literature.
Thank you, Madam Secretary.
Yes.
Oh, you're fine. And now, ladies and gentlemen, representing the Democratic Party, running for the State Senate 14th District, Ms. Renee Watson.
Hi, my name is Renee Watson, and I'm the Democratic candidate for State Senate District 14. Unlike my candidate here, I haven't been in office for 38 years. I've been around this district, this community, working very hard, listening to citizens. I originally started my love for politics and my drive for serving the public back in elementary school, and I wanted to thank David for bringing that up because he actually jogged my memory. I'm speaking from the heart. And that is one thing that I feel politicians do not do very often. So I come to you today just to let you know a little bit about me. School of Rock, when a bill becomes a law, I was part of that program. during elementary school, so thank you for that. That is what actually sparked my interest in running for office, having a passion and zeal for public service. I'm just a bill sitting on Capitol Hill. I'm only a bill. I thought, wow, that is really how a law is made. So I got involved. I attended those meetings and got really involved and was able to debate and walked on the Senate floor. And I was just amazed and in awe. I looked up at the ceiling, just like every one of probably the children in your life have, and in awe of that facility. But what's important is the work that is done within that building by legislators that you elect to office. I'm a district resident of over 20 years. I live currently in Grand Blanc Township. I was on the Grand Blanc School Board. I was appointed treasurer. I have a bachelor's degree in psychology and social work, a master's in public administration, and a wellness certification for preventative medicine from Mayo Clinic Medical School. I had a practice in holistic care. I was an energy medicine psychologist. And you know, I happen to know the person who runs JISD, and I like her a lot. And when she raised that money for that wall, it was to help to children who suffer from trauma. I'm a trauma specialist as well. I've been involved in the school systems here locally in Genesee County and Oakland County. I worked in Oakland County at at St. Vincent Sarah Fisher Center, and I worked in Genesee County at Whaley Children's Center, where I was director of residential. I was hired there because of my trauma background before the water crisis in Flint. I stand for at-risk youth. I was one myself in St. Joseph County. I worked on a farm, worked very hard in order to make ends meet. I know the hard work that this community goes through, but because I knock on doors, I meet with citizens. I was a farmer. I detasseled corn. I had mud this thick on my shoes trying to detassel before the pollen spread, which, as we all know, if we're farmers, if we don't catch it, it makes feed corn instead of seed corn. So our goal was to remove the tassel for seed corn, which now we're in harvest season. I know each and every one of you, although I'm not from this area. I've been a district here. I've served you before. I will serve you, continue to serve you in the future when I am elected your next state senator for District 14. My goal is to meet each and every one of you and get to know you, get to know what issues matter to you most. You know, I looked up Holly and exactly what your village stands for, and it's enhance the quality of life, citizen participation, and proactive decision-making. It's important that we pass Proposal 2 because we need each and every voice to be heard. We need to make sure that it's communicated when changes are made. That is important. When I was on the Grand Blanc School Board, it was important that we inform the community of any millage or any bond that was coming up for renewal or for technology, anything. We made sure that we made an effort to communicate when changes are made. Our citizens have that right to know exactly what's before them. I will fight for each and every one of you. I would appreciate your vote. Please look me up, Renee, number 4 Senate, renee4senate.com. I'm very responsive and I would love to hear your voice. Your voice will be taken to Lansing when you elect me to your next state senator. I'm an advocate for stronger environment. I am fighting to attract new business. Working at the Flint and Genesee Chamber of Commerce, my job was to collaborate. After I was director of residential at Whaley Children's Center and Program Development, my job was to make sure that the trauma of the community in downtown Flint was able to get past it. So they hired me in order to meet and get everyone involved in a room and figure out what resources you have, what strengths does your community have, and what are your challenges. That's great experience and great preparation for your next legislator in Lansing. I will make sure that I get educators, those that work on the roads, those that make things for us, transportation, you name it, all entities, all government entities, all citizens within my district. And the district runs very long, but it's a beautiful district, and I'm happy to serve you. Southern Genesee County and Northern Oakland County, White Lake is cut out, but the two right here, as we all know, it's gerrymandered. I will serve you, and I look forward to that. So when I was working together at the Flint Genesee Chamber of Commerce to make this crisis be able to be livable, we were able to get bottled water into homes. We were able to identify what those strengths are and get individuals to work together, and that's what I intend to do as your next state senator. I ask for your vote, and thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Watson. Thank you, Secretary Johnson. We are going to have 3 questions for our candidates. We will begin the microphone with Secretary Johnson, and then after you are finished, we invite you to pass it over to Ms. Watson, and then the second question, we will begin with Ms. Watson, and third back to Ms. Johnson. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our first question. One of the biggest problems in the state, as we all know, is roads. Traditional methods to fix them seem to act only as a band-aid, as we are back to replacing and patching many of the same areas each year. What is your plan to fix the roads for the long term? Would you consider changing one of the interstates to a turnpike or toll road to raise revenue?
It's a good question because Michigan does have deteriorating roads, deteriorating bridges, and that stops global industry from coming here because they say you don't even have decent infrastructure. I have one of my staff who actually not only bent her frame, but also several of her rims on her car. The average is $89 a year that we pay to fix our cars because of our bad roads. Doesn't do anything good. When we had our recession, unfortunately, those that were serving back then kept borrowing money. And they borrowed until a third of all the money we pay goes for debt reduction. And meanwhile, our roads are deteriorating that we still owe money on. You just can't use money you don't have. It just doesn't work. Meanwhile, there has been some increases, as you noticed when you go to the Secretary of State's office, the legislature bipartisan voted in 20% increase on getting your tabs. And it has become such a high priority that the legislature, and again bipartisan, and when I was in the legislature, I never had one bill that I put through that wasn't bipartisan. I think it's important we all work together. But they put another $300 million into our roads. They've made a commitment that it's a high priority, and they will continue to put enough money. Our biggest problem, we can't find people to work. They have a job that you could take today if you know a young person, any person, that has a commercial driver's license that starts out at $25 an hour, $15 if you have no training. The people that we're trying to pay, the private sector, to put the roads in can't get enough people to work. So please send them there. We need our roads fixed. There's nothing more important, and we need to continue to make it a #1 priority and get our money to our roads. That's right. That's right.
Well, I'm married to someone that lives in Washington, D.C. And he's come here, his friends have come here. We've invited them because I'm a newlywed. We got married. And I invited them to Michigan. And you know, they left with a wonderful impression. Our state really showed them a great time. But one thing, every time, is your roads. Your roads are terrible. In fact, I hear it so much from those that live outside of our state and, of course, in our state, that it's embarrassing. It's not just the roads, it's the bridges, it's the water, it's our infrastructure. The whole thing needs help. So that is why I'm running. One major reason is the infrastructure. I worked hard in Flint in order to make sure that children have water to drink, as we all know that has not happened yet. Actually, I passed down Dort Highway and I took a video of all of the cars that are lined up to get water, waiting for the door to open because there's not many resource distribution centers around left. I'm tired of this, and I'm sure each and every one of you is tired of this. I even had my child, my daughter, who's 16, said, maybe we should plant flowers in the potholes. That's not a bad idea. As your legislator, it is a priority that we get this done. No more excuses, no more earmarking things, changing the budget, moving it around. We need to figure this out. Everybody needs to act and resolve this. It's going to take a lot of money, but first things first, we need to identify how the problem will be solved and solve it. Enough talk about it. Let's fix the damn roads, as Gretchen Whitmer says.
Our next question, do you support a nonpartisan group to redraw congressional districts, taking it out of the hands of political parties? And how would you go about devising such a commission?
Well, of course, it needs to be nonpartisan. It needs to have example representation from all parties and citizens who are not affiliated with a party. So I looked at the commission makeup, and I definitely agree that we need to take it out of the legislators' hands. You know, Democrats and Republicans are guilty of this. Currently, the Republicans drew the line that dictated all of our districts, and although my district is wonderful, beautiful, and I love the people in it, I'm happy to represent the District of 14. It's very gerrymandered. You know, we have the city of Fenton, but not the township. We have Brandon, but not Ortonville. We have Holly. We have some addresses in Ortonville, but not Ortonville. So we have Waterford and then Highland Township, but we cut out a big chunk in the middle. So I am in favor of this. I think this is wonderful to take it out of the politicians' hands. Let the citizens' voice be heard. That's what it intends to do, and I hope you support it. Thank you.
Something must be done. We do have creativeness on both sides when they get a chance to do it. My concern with the ballot initiative is it doesn't add more laws to stop what's already happening. And each one of those people that are chosen by the Secretary of State. It will become one of the most important, if not the most important right now. It's third. You have governor, lieutenant governor. When they're out of town, I become governor. But the fact is when you're a Secretary of State, you run affiliated with a party. And even though they say that they'll pick people that are some Republicans, some Democrats, and some that have so far had no party affiliation, we all have some strong feelings one way or another on something. I would have liked to have seen, and I would have still liked to see, no matter whether it passes or not, laws that make it so you can't be creative. So you can't have people that are getting $44,000 a year and they're beholden to the Secretary of State, who is in a partisan position. I've prided myself as Secretary of State of making every single decision nonpartisan. But not all Secretary of States act that way. Not all of them work that way. And that's why when I was a legislator, every single bill I put through had bipartisan support. Not all people will do that. So I would like to see laws that stop either party, whether it becomes under the Secretary of State, another partisan position, or under the legislature. It must have more laws so that we can't have that creativity that helps either party.
No, you keep
I'm
going.
up next.
Yep, yep.
Okay, go ahead.
Our third question, how might the legalization of marijuana change Michigan's economic and social spheres? What is the most important potential outcome of Proposal 1?
Well, I'm chief election official, but I'm also in charge of traffic safety. And my biggest concern right now is traffic safety. We already know that a lot of accidents happen because people are intoxicated. I take away about 42 to 48,000 driver's licenses every year from people that get caught, and the average amount of time that they drive before they get caught is over 80 times. And when you combine marijuana and alcohol and some of the other drugs that are out there right now, my biggest concern is about road safety and what's going to happen out there. Whatever happens with the ballot proposal, I will support it, and I will be fully behind it because it's what people voted for. But I think that's the one place we really have not figured out how we're going to do it, how we're going to be able to determine. And then the other concern will be that some of the private industry, just like right now, these $25 an hour jobs that are waiting for people that might just have a commercial driver's license or some skill in building roads. We've got the money, we don't have the people. And one of the reasons is they can't pass the drug test. So I think that it's a mixed bag, and my biggest concern is what will happen to our kids and how safe our roads will be. And we also know that when young people, it's fairly new, and I'm a clinical social worker by education. I've got a K through 9 for a bachelor's, and then I am a MSW from Wayne State. And my biggest concern is now we know that when young people smoke marijuana a lot, actually their brain atrophies. And so I hope that if this passes, that we get the word out so people can protect themselves, so they know what to do. And what the social impact and financial impact when you blend all this together, I really can't tell you.
Regarding Proposal 1, I am in support. I think that the choice should be up to the individual. I think that on the ballot, it should be left up to the citizens as well. And based on what the citizens decide, then we will go ahead and look and regulate it and figure out, I've heard maybe align it along the lines with alcohol. We remember days of prohibition. We went through this before. We'll get through it again. But we need to make sure that we identify the revenue that is from that once it is passed. We put it to good use, such as roads or education or something that we really need to put revenue for. But again, I'll leave this up to the citizens, and I will legislate accordingly. But I am in support of it. I'm in support of medical. I think there needs to be stronger restrictions on the recreation, and that will be done after the citizens' voice is said on November 6th. So to be continued. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Running for Senate from the 14th District, we have Ms. Ruth Johnson and we have Ms. Renee Watson. We thank them for joining us. We become more and more local. We now move into Oakland County, Commissioner of the 2nd District. We have two guests we'd like to introduce at this time. Representing our Democratic Party, we have Ms. Danielle McCluskey, and representing our Republican Party, we have Mr. Bob Hoffman. We invite them to the stage at this time. We'll begin to allow our candidates once again to make their statements. We will allow Ms. McCluskey the podium first for a couple moments to say some words. Thank you.
Good evening. It's been a long night, hasn't it? Early on, we were talking about state issues. We've now moved to the county level. I'm Danielle McCluskey. I'm running for Oakland County Commissioner in District 2. I am running for County Commissioner so that our voices are heard at the county level. I firmly believe that District 2, which is the largest land mass of the 21 districts on the Oakland County Commission, is ignored at the county level. We are a unique corner of the county. We're very rural compared to the rest of the county. And our issues are not the same issues as the rest of the county. First of all, we have private infrastructure in our district. We have our own wells. We have our own septics. The county is not providing us our infrastructure. That becomes problematic for this county when we look at the reality of the county. And Secretary Johnson, one of the reasons we're having problems filling jobs in this county is because this county is more than 50%, 55 years of age or older next year. We are a majority senior county, and we have done nothing in our plan to accommodate that issue. Our private infrastructure combined with our seniors creates an issue in District 2 that needs to be managed and needs to be planned for. We have a tremendous resource in our seniors. We are doing nothing for our resource. We are not creating any plans for them to continue working or to take that knowledge and talent base that we have that created a very privileged and rich county and use that into the future to show how we are going to develop in our path forward with our seniors. Additionally, although this county has a great plan in its taxpayer base, it's going to shift. As our taxpayers age and retire, our taxpayer base changes, and we have to look at how we're going to accommodate that. Our current county commissioners and our current government in Oakland County is focused on business and the I-75 corridor to the exclusion of its residents. I think that our focus should be on our residents. I would ask for your support in November so that I can be your voice at the county level and make sure that our county resources are appropriately managed and appropriately dedicated to the citizens of District 2. Thank you.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, from the Republican Party, Mr. Bob Hoffman.
Thank you very much. I'm Bob Hoffman, the President, Oakland County Commissioner, and I have to tell you, I take this job seriously. It's an honor and a privilege to be your county commissioner. I was born and raised in Waterford. I started my first business when I was 19. I started my second business when I was 24, and I jokingly tell people that 25 years ago I bought the farm and I'm still alive. I have a farm in Highland. Our district, as you know, is the beautiful community of Highland Rose, Springfield, Holly, and Groveland Townships, and the village of Holly. Every election cycle at the county, people will say, Bob, have you ever thought about going to Lansing? And I jokingly say, yes, on a field trip with my 13-year-old son. I have no intention. I love this job. I love serving the people. It's actually a position where you can actually help people. And throughout my whole life, I've dedicated my life to helping people, and that's the best part about it. I'm all for open, honest, and transparent government. When I was 32 or 33 years old, I was a Waterford Township supervisor. And in 1988, when I was running for re-election, I lost the election. And I have to tell you, it's more fun to win than to lose. But a lot of people told me the reason I lost the election is because I suspended the fire chief a few months before the election, and I considered him my friend. And I've taken on people no matter what party it is, Democrat or Republican. I'm kind of blind to the party. But I suspended him because I caught him manipulating the civil service list to get a relative of his a job, bypassing other people, and the person he wanted to get the job wasn't qualified. On the Oakland Press, January 1st, 1989, the headlines were the winners and losers for 1988. And they had my picture on the front page of the paper. They said Bob Hoffman might have lost the election, but he stood up for the taxpayers. And I've done that in my entire life, and I'm proud of it. One thing about the Oakland County Board of Commissioners and Washington, D.C. could take an example from the way we conduct ourselves. There's 14 Republicans and 7 Democrats. I have never, ever witnessed a personal attack on anybody. A lot of what we do is bipartisan. We all learn at an early point in our commission jobs that we represent our constituents first and the county second. And I plan on continuing to do that. I love this job. I love serving the people, and I'm very honored, and I thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hoffman. Ms. Sanders will be addressing the questions. We'll give the microphone to Ms. McCluskey first.
Okay, our first question is going to be, according to Michigan census numbers, Oakland County sits second in state population behind Wayne County. What role do you believe that gives us in Michigan at a local, countrywide, regional, and state level?
Well, obviously, the role that we should want as a county is to be a leader. And sitting second is always a great place to sit because you know where the role is that you need to go. One of the things I think we need to do in Oakland County is make sure that we use our advantages to attract talent to the area. As I mentioned, we have an aging problem. And in order to accommodate that aging problem, we need to make sure that we are attracting youth to the county and that we are providing them with the things that they want. Good paying jobs, appropriate infrastructure, and the ability to live their life in the manner they want. Recreational activities, outdoor activities, great housing, and great schools for their children. So I think that we should use the talent that we have currently, and we should plan for the future by figuring out where we want to go. I also think as a county, it's very important to look at what we want our county to be, what our plan is. Do we want a county that is based on certain issues? Do we want to promote big business down the I-75 corridor? Is that where we see our mission? I don't think it is from talking to citizens every day. I have been out knocking doors, calling voters, and I hear different things than where the county currently is going. We have a county executive that has been in that county since I was a law clerk, and I've been licensed to practice law for over 30 years. So I can tell you that the direction we've had is the direction we're always going to have unless we start making some changes. I think we need to make some changes in this county to preserve the integrity of life that we should have.
Thank you very much. I think Oakland County is a great place to live and work. And Oakland County is a leader throughout the nation. We are a leader in the state, we are a leader in the nation. We have different programs to try to accommodate people. We have a great parks and recreation system. Danielle mentioned the seniors. The Oakland County Board of Commissioners is very conscious of that our population is aging. We've spent over the last 10 years $600,000 on seniors. Recently, we just allocated $30,000 for anti-bullying against seniors. We have programs set up in the health department that have vision and hearing screening and immunization and flu shots and that type of thing. The sheriff department has a program that provides seniors with a device for emergencies so they can contact somebody. We are very conscious and we are the leaders and we can plan on continuing doing this. And one thing I want to note too, there is a great difference between different areas of the county. We live in a rural community. I like a rural community. I like it like this. And I hope a lot of people do too. That's why we moved out here. And you know, I don't want some of the problems they might have in the south end. But again, I represent my constituents first. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're going to be next, I believe. Yeah. Okay, so next question is going to be, Oakland County contains very diverse socioeconomic areas. How do you plan on meeting the needs of the upper, middle, and lower class without alienating anyone?
Well, I think first you do that by leading by example. And as I mentioned a few minutes ago, that's what I'm proud about the Oakland County Board of Commissioners. There's none of this backbiting, and we do lead by example, and we have different programs for different people. We have a community development block grant program that helps people, even seniors too, with home improvements and that type of thing. We have programs that, you know, cover everything. But we are conscious about those people on the lower economic ladder, and we come up with programs to try to help them. Thank you, Emily.
Yep.
Well, I think that government's responsibility is to all its citizens. And so whether you are an upper income citizen, a middle income citizen, or a lower income citizen, I think there are certain responsibilities that the government has to you regardless of your socioeconomic status. I think we have a responsibility as a county government to make sure our infrastructure is sound. I think we have a responsibility to make sure that our water and sewers or septics are appropriately taken care of. I think that we have a responsibility to make sure that our seniors, regardless of their age, have different options. I think that as a government, we have to make sure that our focus is on our citizens and not on our businesses. Mr. Hoffman mentioned $300,000, I believe, that was given to seniors. I would talk about a program that the county also supports for businesses, where they are giving no interest loans to businesses for green development, as long as the business is large enough to have $60,000 a month in utility bills. I think government should not be supporting businesses. I think they should be supporting their citizens. And I think we have an obligation to make sure that we help those on the path to a better life.
Our third and final question is going to be, so the hot topic of the night has been recreational marijuana. So what are your feelings towards a new business in Oakland County acting as a dispensary? What regulations would you like to see?
Well, that's a difficult question because there are regulations right now and there's a ballot proposal. So, you have to put yourself in the position of what are the voters going to do? If the ballot proposal passes, I think the legislation will be forthcoming and how the dispensary will be handled. I am concerned about the dispensary laws that are currently available simply because of the licensing effect of the cost. It's my understanding that there are a very limited number of licenses currently available, and those licenses are going for a significant sum of money just to even be involved in the process. I would like to make sure if the ballot proposal is passed that we have a level playing field for all potential investors in what will become a recreational marijuana program as opposed to the medical marijuana program. So to me, the most important thing in this type of dispensary and disbursement is that we have a level playing field, that we do not have big money interests who are able to push forward an agenda that is different than perhaps what the citizens voted for.
You know, when I was at Waterford Township, I used to always ask the cops, how's that war on drugs coming? Because what we're doing now is not working. But I have all the same concerns as Secretary Johnson and some of the other issues that were raised. And we have to also be careful we don't conflict with the federal laws too, because that just will create a lot more problems. And I think it's short-sighted to look at the point that we're just going to tax it and we're going to get a bunch of money. And I do hope the legislature, if this thing passes, they do pass some laws that have some controls on them. But my biggest concern too is owning a business where I have CDL truck drivers, that if they can't pass that test, because marijuana, I understand, stays in your system a lot longer, I think it's going to create a lot more problems. But again, I'll support what the voters do, and we'll have to live with it.
Once again, ladies and gentlemen, for the Oakland County Commission, 2nd District, Mr. Bob Hoffman, Ms. Danielle McCluskey. And once again, we come even more local. Our next office we are going to be looking at is for the Holly Township Parks Board. We have 3 candidates, and I believe 1 has checked in with us this evening. So, unless I am mistaken, we'd like to welcome to the stage Mr. Liam Feeney, one of our candidates for the Holly Township Parks and Rec. And then also we have Mr. Steve LaPlante and Mr. Tony Engberg. We do not have them, so Mr. Feeney, and I am also proud to say, a little plug here, one of my former AP government students.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming out today, especially those who have stayed this long. So a little background about me. I grew up in Madison Heights until I was about 14 or 15 years old, and then I moved up here. And down there we had tons of programs for people of all ages. We had yoga, we had soccer games, basketball games, whatever. And we moved up here around my freshman year, and I saw all these gorgeous landscapes, these parks, this community that I never had when I was down there, and I was thinking, wow, this is amazing. But the longer I stayed here, the more I realized there's not a whole lot for those people to do, and I wondered why. And then I did some research into it, and I just found out that the Parks Board Commission just was not doing its job correctly. Now, my goal, if I was elected, would be to try and implement more programs, because that's the big issue right now. It's just, there's not enough stuff for everybody. There's mainly football and there's a chaos volleyball here at the Richter Center, but outside of that, there's not a whole lot there. And what is there is either very limited in what it does, or it's costing money for the people to do it. So the budget isn't being put in place very well. And I would like to see, if elected, would be to have that budget be put more towards stuff that personally would make it not cost-bearing on the people of the community, but more on the Parks Board Commission itself. And some great example, for example, would be the football program. Here in town, we currently have 2 separate middle school football programs because parents were so upset with how the board treated the football program that they separated them. Ideally, I would like to see both of those programs be one, but I understand why they, separated, and I hope to see in the future that they come back together to just one program. Furthermore, there's stuff for senior citizens in this community, but they are at a price that could easily be avoided if the budget was put towards that, but instead they put that towards the senior citizens, and I just don't think that's right. And I believe it's the Parks Board job to make sure that the people of Holly have recreational activities to do, and that's why I'm running. I am the only one that is not on the ballot. I am running as a libertarian, as a write-in. For those of you voting for that particular thing, I have handouts so you don't forget my name. But yeah, and that's pretty much it.
Once again, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Feeney is running as a write-in candidate. If you choose to on November 6th, write-in candidate, you have to make sure the name is correct. Mr. Kinnamon.
You spoke a lot about your vision for the parks, especially regarding activities, but how do you intend to use Holly's natural resources?
Well, Holly's natural resources aren't being used at all at the moment. Like Sorensen Park has barely been kept up at all. So I would like to see more activities, like have nature walks for the younger people and of all ages, older people, high schoolers, stuff like that. I'd also like to see the budget for this stuff be put into use to keeping that maintained and making sure that it doesn't get run down as it currently has been. I'd also I would want to see a lot of strong use of, like I said, Sorensen Park's a perfect example, or the Lakeside Park, for example, like expanding on what we already have and then just improving it more with renovations and paying volunteers to help out run different programs that we want to see run through there. And yeah.
Our second question, how do you intend to spread the word of these programs you've been talking about?
Well, a big issue is there's no way to get in contact with anybody at the Parks Board Commission's office. That has been a running problem that I've heard many people complain about. So the first step there would be to make sure that that we have somebody on that line so that people, when they call up or look on the website and want to get more information, there's somewhere to get that information and somebody to get it from in a timely manner. I've heard many complaints about nobody being able to get in contact and just not knowing what's going on. So on top of having somebody on that line, I would also like to see the website kept up to date so that people know what's going on, maybe update it once a week or whenever anything changes. Other than that, it would probably just be getting the word out there with flyers and banners in the usual way that people get stuff out. So.
You spoke a lot about revenue, and in a time when revenue is a priority, how do you raise them without burdening citizens with taxes? Would you consider maybe fees for parks or certain activities?
Well, the thing is, right now, the fees for the activities that we do have are ridiculously high for what they provide. For example, there was a photography class that was sponsored by the Parks Board Commission, and it was $80 to get into it, but you weren't provided anything, and you didn't get a camera or anything. You had to bring all that by yourself. And to me, that was way too high. And it's so much not the issue that there isn't money there, it's not being used properly. We have it in going to salaries that are, in my opinion, too large, and going to people who I personally feel like aren't doing their job correctly, and I feel like they need to be put more towards the people of Holly and making sure that we have our community, our communities better. So.
Thank you.
Once again, ladies and gentlemen, for the Holly Township Parks, write-in candidate, Mr. Liam Feeney. We now move to the Holly Village President. We have 3 candidates, all in nonpartisan positions. We would like to introduce and invite to the stage, please, Ms. Nicole Edwards Rankin, Mr. John Louve, and Mr. Thomas McKinney. As our candidates take their places on stage, we'll give the podium first over to Ms. Edwards Rankin.
So, just to clarify, my name is Nicole Edwards. That's my legal name. Just want to let everybody know that. It's been a big deal about what my name is or isn't, and why I did not take my husband's last name when we got married 3 months ago, not 3 years ago. It's okay. It's a really common mistake that people make an assumption that when you get married, you take your husband's name. I don't want to spend a majority of my time speaking about my last name and my choices. If you're interested in learning any more, you can read the Tri-County Times article that was published yesterday, or you can visit my personal Facebook page to learn about my reasonings. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it because it's 2018 and we shouldn't be having a conversation about what somebody's last name is. It's about the opportunity that I bring and the value I bring to the community. I would like to thank the Chamber of Commerce for hosting this event tonight. I'm very proud to say that I did serve as the Chamber President for 3 years. In that time, I balanced the budget, I increased membership, and I was a spokesperson for the community, which was a great opportunity to build relationships within the community as well as neighboring communities. And a little bit off track, the whole name thing threw me off, so I was very well organized and practiced, so you'll have to excuse me jumping around a little bit. My degree's in social work with minors in sociology and multicultural relations. I believe very much in giving back to the community. I did own a marketing business and specializing in working for nonprofits and small businesses. I provided digital marketing services and web design and those kinds of things. I haven't really held an office in the community or an elected position for the last 3 years, but I've continued to be active in the community. I spend a lot of my time volunteering, parks cleanup, volunteer weekly at the Holly Moose in the kitchen, and I do use my skills as with my web design and digital marketing experience to design a lot of things for the village to use and their promotional materials. I am on the Historic District Commission. I haven't lived in Holly my whole entire life, so it's always exciting to me when I spend an afternoon at the library learning about our community and just seeing things with a fresh set of eyes. I am a homeowner in the community, and I believe that community beautification starts at home. And I did pay my taxes, if anybody is concerned with that. I work for a heating and cooling company currently, so I pull all of the permits and schedule all the inspections for 34 Home Depot stores, which is a really exciting job. I do get to work with other municipalities on a daily basis, which I really enjoy. I like seeing how other municipalities operate, and I think that that's great. However, it hasn't caused any issues of violation of Open Meetings Act, my relationships with them. I have, gotten a lot of questions about, my experience and why I'm running, and I would say that I do have the least amount of experience. I know that both of the people that I'm running against have at least 20 years on me, but hopefully I've given you enough information about myself tonight that you feel confident to vote for me November 6th.
Thank you, Ms. Edwards. Next, ladies and gentlemen, we welcome Mr. John Louve.
I think it's time to go home. But there's one issue that I think is very important and one reason why I'm running: the water bills. What has happened here with this fixed amount that's put on everyone's bill, whether you're running a swimming pool or if you're just trying to barely make by, you have to pay that same amount. That's unfair. The people that use the most amount of water should be paying most of the portion of the bill. That's basic stuff. In other words, the fairness of this water system billing is out of whack. And that's the one thing that I want to start with, to change that billing system so that all you do is pay what you use. And if you don't use any water, you don't pay for the debt that was incurred because of the big, massive expansion project that was underway. This gray lady is an example of buildings that were going to be demolished, historic buildings that create the essence of what Holly is. They were going to blow the thing up. I saved that. The mill, they were going to blow that up. I saved that. Saved some other properties here. These are the essence of what we have here in Holly, and it needs to be preserved. The next thing that's coming up, we have this fire hall coming up. I'd like to see what the plans are. They haven't presented the plans. The police station, they're talking about closing that. They're talking about selling the fire hall. I don't see a for sale sign on. These things need to be done in a transparent, open way, and they're not. I don't want to keep talking about all of these issues. That kind of boils it down really well. If you want to find out some more, the American Pickers were over. And if you want to see the show, you can use season 16, episode 13, and it's the last segment. So I don't have to tell you about my life story. You can watch it on TV. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Louve. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we have Mr. Thomas McKinney.
Good evening, and thank you for taking time out of your schedule to come here and listen tonight. My name is Thomas McKinney. I'm presently the interim village president, and I have the privilege of serving in that office, and I would like to continue in that office after November 6th election. I'm from Holly. I grew up in Holly. I grew up with my 5 siblings. My father had a business in Holly for several decades. My resume, which is published in my newspaper, I have copies of it here, it's also online, goes back to my senior year in Holly High School, which is in this building, and I added to my professional resume that I was a all-Metro League offensive lineman in 1969. The team, you don't remember it because the team went 1-7-1 that year. I own my own business. I have been practicing law for over 40 years. I have been on the State Bank Board of Directors for 25 years. I've seen that business grow from a $250 million local bank to an $800 million local bank. It is rated among the banks in Michigan by several categories. It's rated number 3 in the state. It's a very well-run business, and I've been proud to serve and proud to grow with that bank. When it comes to the village of Holly, I think that 2 things are primary for you, the constituents: public safety and public works. We have demand for public safety and public works 24/7, and when you don't answer that demand, you have problems. You have water problems, you have crisis problems, and it becomes very expensive. So I support the new public safety building on Saginaw Street. It's more centrally located. It has resulted in an improvement in our ISO rating. That improvement in our rating results in savings on your house insurance. In addition to public safety and public works, I then feel there are strong issues which I list as character issues for our community. And I feel very strongly about the restoration of the depot. I want to move forward on that. If you research Sturgis, Michigan, and their depot, Wolf House and Building Movers are online, and they have a very informative video about how they move their brick and stone depot from an obscure location, not unlike the one in Holly for our depot, to a more public location, and incorporated it with landscaping and walkability. That's a requirement when you have grant money from the state of Michigan, and I fully support moving forward on the depot restoration to the extent that the village can participate. Character. That's Holly's character, and I think we should emphasize that. In addition, our character is spoken by and with our entryways to this community, and unfortunately, blight in our community. There was a public study done years ago. It's a famous book in which they authored the broken window syndrome. And the study quite simply said that when you neglect care in a community, crime follows. There's not going to be a crime wave, but we shouldn't neglect care. We have beautiful infrastructure with our streets, our roads, our lakes, our river, and we should emphasize it, we should groom it, and when people come into Holly on Grange Hall Road or on North Holly Road or on Milford Road, they should recognize when they arrive in the village. I think that your one vote when you're the village president, 90% of the votes are unanimous at the village. So when we have disagreements, we shouldn't be disagreeable. We should be more collaborative. We can be better. We should be more collaborative. We are collaborative. We can do better. And we should quit trying to fix the blame for past mistakes and fix our problems for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McKinney. We will turn the microphone over to Ms. Sanders, and Ms. Edwards, we will give you this microphone first.
We're going to have 2 questions for you guys today. Starting with, what qualifications and experience do you bring to the table when it comes to leading the village council towards important issues?
Well, as I said earlier, I have the least amount of experience, but I do bring a fresh set of eyes to some of the same problems that the village has faced for many years. I sit on the historic district, and I've spent quite a bit of time at the library reading the 1901 newspaper, and I found it very amusing that in 1901 we were talking about the bike lanes and where people should drive their bikes. We were talking about water issues. So I think that we've continued to have a lot of the same problems, and maybe we've looked at them in a lot of the same ways for many years. So I think bringing a new set of eyes, a fresh perspective to the community will be an important thing. I haven't lived here my whole entire life, so you know, I think that that's what I have to bring. But as far as experience, I do admittedly have the least amount, just by sheer age.
I've been cross-examined, and yes, I'm older than you, and I'm not sure if it's 20 years or more. I have previously served on the village council. Excuse me. I was on the ZBA. I served on the planning commission and served as chairman of the planning commission. I previously served on the DDA, and I've been serving on the DDA, the Downtown District Authority, Downtown Development Authority, since I became interim village president. In addition to my experience working with the commissions and the council and the staff outside of Holly, the bulk of my legal career was as a municipal lawyer, representing communities in Oakland County, including Farmington Hills, Bloomfield Township, Independence Township, working with their councils and working with their zoning board of appeals, and helping them with their acquisitions and their contracts. So it's a pretty full 40-year career in municipal law. Thank you.
Well, I'm not a lawyer. I'm an engineer. Actually, I'm a rocket scientist. And I went down and watched them launch one of the moon rockets and met the astronauts later. But the facts are the best way to decide what to do. And all you need to do is have the facts out in the open, and they many times speak for themselves. I worked at General Motors going out and solving problems, and that's the way I worked on finding them out and resolving them. And this water situation is an example of how not to do it, because that's why it's the way it is. And I've worked since I've come to town to try and control this erratic kind of analysis that's taken place. So that's the kind of thing that I would like to see done more of. Thank you.
Mr. Louve, you can start the second question.
Oh, I got two.
You're in.
And then we'll go right next to the line.
All right, so your next question. One of the roles of the village president is to give the council information concerning the affairs of the village. How do you see yourself fulfilling this role by communicating and gathering information in the village?
Well, that's the thing that I just talked about the water. And you just put down the information, and it will speak for itself. In the same way, we need to have the different departments that are there come and have a report at the beginning of the year. What are we going to do for the year? Where are we going to be at the end of the year? And these council meetings that are the opportunity to discuss that and present it to everybody, they don't do that. They just say, oh, here it is, and that's it, and we move on. Let's get the data and the facts out and have goals at the beginning of the year and the end of the year and how we're progressing, and have the people that want to come down and ask questions and get answers instead of, I don't know.
The question?
Communication. Okay.
I'm an old man, I forgot the question.
Okay. One of the roles of the village president is to give the council information concerning the affairs of the village. How do you see yourself fulfilling this role by communicating and gathering information in the village?
Much of the information that we gather is through the resources at the village with the staff. In addition, there's a lot of information that comes into the village president that's addressed to him in particular. You review that, you work with the staff, you're tuned into what's going on, excuse me, through local newspapers, the Flint Journal, Oakland Press. There's local newspapers online which have a lot of information. You gather that information. There is a filtering process. Not all the discussions online are helpful. And then you share it with your colleagues, either informally or formally in a meeting. Thank you.
Will you please repeat the question again? Absolutely. Okay, it's a long one. One of the roles of the village president is to give the council information concerning the affairs of the village. How do you see yourself fulfilling this role by communicating and gathering information in the village?
Certainly. So I think that one of the important things is, yes, the village staff and management does provide a lot of information, to the council president to keep them up to date on day-to-day things. I think that it's also important for the president to spend a significant amount of time doing their own independent research on the information that's been provided to them, and then disseminating that information. So spending some time doing your own research based on what's been provided by the staff, I think is important. And then, excuse me, as well as communicating that information effectively to all of the council members. I did mention before that I had my own marketing business, which is primarily about getting the word out to people about important things. So I think that we have a unique opportunity to reach people in a different way than how we used to. So I think that there's lots of technology available to be able to disseminate that information to the council members. I also think that it's really important to involve the community, because a lot of the decisions, I've been to a lot of council meetings, and there isn't always necessarily a fantastic turnout. I think that providing information to our citizens as far as what's being decided on is a very important thing. I don't know the last time that anybody here in the audience visited our website, but it would be a spectacular thing to have our website up to date and have information readily available not only to the council members but also to the community. Thank you.
Once again, ladies and gentlemen, our candidates for the village president, Ms. Nicole Edwards, Mr. John Louve, and Mr. Thomas McKinney. We thank them. And finally, we have 5 members of the Village Council we would like to invite to the stage at this time. Once again, all of them in a nonpartisan state. We invite Mr. Richard Kinnamon, Mr. Rick Powers, Mr. Chris Rankin, Mr. Tim Terpening, and Mr. Jim Perkins. Mr. Perkins. Gentlemen, we thank each of you for coming up. Once again, we're going to give each of you a moment here at the podium to make a statement. We will begin. I'm just going to go right down the list that I have here. We will begin with Mr. Kinnamon.
Richard Kinnamon, I'm a part of your community for only about 4 years, but I've been very involved in those 4 years. I came to town as a pastor. I've been pastoring for more than 20 years. And many years before that, part-time. I also have been a private business owner. I have I've been a substitute teacher. I'm currently a substitute teacher in our school district. I am also currently the director of the Chamber of Commerce, and would like to transition just a little bit and say, because of that role, and the event this evening is an example of personal integrity that I like to bring into everything that I do. This is normally an event that, as the director of the Chamber, I would host, or spend most of my time behind this podium. As a candidate, that's not the right place to be. And I believe that a good opportunity was there when we could hand it off to someone who is definitely nonpartisan in everything that they were doing. I'm more than happy to say that my son is part of that, and in no way did he even allude to me what questions might come up tonight. We kept that very separate in our family. That's part of the integrity that I like to bring to what I do. I am a person, I liked what was brought up about studying what you are needing to work on. I like to think things through carefully and evaluate them. As the role that I have played, not only in the chamber, but in many of the volunteer areas that I'm a part of in this community, I find that Holly is a wonderful place to live, a wonderful place to work, a wonderful place to be involved. And I believe that as a community, we come together and bring so many great things here. Every one of you brings great things to our community. And I believe that together we can accomplish so much more. I see a community as well that is changing. Whether we are comfortable with that or not, the world that is moving up I-75 and creating family parks and things just across the way is changing our community. We have new residents coming into our community that we are welcoming. We have new businesses that are coming into our community that we need to be welcoming. But as those come in, we need to be on the forefront and pre-plan what we want our community to continue to be. Holly has a wonderful history. Holly is a wonderful, historic, small community. And even as it changes, we need to maintain that. As we look at ordinances and a master plan that is being considered in the new council people will be a part of developing the next master plan for Holly. I would like to see us be on the forefront rather than on the backside of receiving or being prepared with that information and those plans. I want us to be able to say when a new business is looking at coming into Holly that we have the right place for you to be, rather than the businesses saying, this is where we are going to be. We have the ability to do that and still be a welcoming community. I hope that we can work together.
Thank you, Mr. Kinnamon. Next we have Mr. Rick Powers.
Well, I'm about ready to go to bed, but here I am. My name's Rick Powers. I've lived here in Holly for the last 15 years. A little bit of background. I was pretty much born and raised in the Flint area. Went to school at Flint Northern, went to the military. I'm a Vietnam veteran and currently working a lot with the veterans organizations in the area. Came out of the service and went on to Western Michigan, graduated with a teacher's degree. At that time, there were just no teaching jobs, so I went into a little known type of sales job at the time, selling pharmaceuticals. So I spent the next 30 years selling pharmaceuticals for a pretty major drug company called Novartis. And I can't tell you the number of times I've been at parties and people would say to me, are you a drug dealer? I go, no, yeah, but they're all legal, believe me. And so anyways, I hope to be your next councilman here. I think I bring a fair amount of experience. For 17 years, I've served as a president of a foundation, a medium-sized foundation. We went through some pretty hard times and some good times, and I pretty much left that after I retired. I think the foundation was a better foundation after I got done with it. And I think one of the things I brought to the table was teaching people and working with, collaborating with people to help money to be raised. In this case, it was for brain research. That's about it. I'm looking for your vote. I will consider it an honor to serve this village. Jim Perkins and I were sitting down there and we made kind of a contest who could get done the quickest, and Jim, thank you.
Next, ladies and gentlemen, we have Mr. Chris Rankin.
Good evening, or it's almost good morning. I'm not much of a public speaker. I know that there were some people up here that had some very eloquent speeches and made this look easy. I'm not going to be one of those people, just so you know. I've been in Holly for about 14 years. I've just got to be honest. I don't think that a village council position is really something that requires a lot of political savvy. I mean, as council members, we're not out horse trading our votes for tax vote, or, for a tax plan versus a transportation bill, and it's just not that complex. So we just don't have that kind of complexity. So anyone with a decent amount of common sense and logic and a little bit of community pride can be reasonably effective in this job. I've got those qualities in spades. I've been volunteering in this community for a decade or more. I've been on the Parks Commission for the past 7 years, or 9 years. I've been on council for the past 6. A little bit, I think, about what I do for a living that I think kind of highlights my common sense and logic. I'm proud to be able to say that I've worked for a little over 20 years at a family-owned business down in Bloomfield Hills, and they've been in business for more than 50 years. The original owner came over from Germany when he was a teenager. He was a mechanic. He opened up a car repair facility in 1963, I believe it was. And he has since retired and passed the dealership on to his children. And it's still in the family, and I've been working for them for about 20 years. For about the last 14 of those 20 years, I've been the warranty administrator. Half my job is basically medical billing, but for cars. And the other half is making sure that the billing that we do is going to stand up to the scrutiny of an audit. Kind of a numbers guy. My job involves keeping track of a lot of information, and if I don't have the information right at hand, I've got to know where to find it. I'm very logical, I'm very methodical, pretty level-headed, even keel. I like to think about things. I'm not one to make rash decisions, and I'm also not one to make quick judgments. So as far as the community pride is involved, or is concerned, I'm involved in many, if not most, of the community events. I know I've seen a lot of you around at fireworks shows. I've been involved in fireworks fundraisers, parks cleanups, Dickens Festival every year. Since Nicole and I moved into our house, we've worked hard to increase the curb appeal of that house. And it's not because we want somebody to buy it, it's just because we want to set an example for the community. We want people to look at our modest little house and say, hey, you know what, they take care of their house, we can take care of ours too. And somebody was mentioning something about the broken window theory, and it's kind of along those lines, where the more people who are proud of their homes and their properties and take care of their things, the more your neighbors are kind of, hey, I think maybe I'll take care of mine too. So, it's funny, because even after 6 years on council, I don't really consider myself a politician. I'm just a guy who cares about the community and wants to be involved in continuing on this upward trend that we've had the last few years. Thanks.
Next, ladies and gentlemen, straight from his workshop at the North Pole, we have Mr. Tim Terpening.
Glad we got that out of the way right away. To the Chamber of Commerce, thank you for the invitation to speak at this event. To my esteemed fellow candidates for all elected positions here today, especially those who stayed, and to the citizens of the Village of Holly here this evening, thank you for attending this important event. We have many, or had many, high-level candidates from national, state, and county levels here this evening. Thank you for attending. People may ask, why should we consider what we're doing here right now as a village council as an important position? And I actually say that I understand completely the question. And in contemplating that question, by researching the history of this great nation, my response is simple, but I believe to be very accurate. The office of council member of the Village of Holly is equally as important as any of the other offices represented here today, this evening. As a nation, and as a government which was declared over 200 years ago, a government that citizens have fought for and died for since the beginning of its existence, the concept has always been very simple and yet so important, that we as a free and independent nation have the God-given right to live independently, to govern ourselves in a civil union at every level of our government. And this is what has shown to be a government by the people and for the people. This concept is just as important at the village level as at the state and federal level. As citizens of this municipality, as well as any municipality, we have the right to be treated with the respect deserved by every citizen in this great land. We have the right, when we call any level of our government, of offices, to be treated with respect to any question that we have regarding our community, without the fear of being denied due process, and to be given the compassion and respect as fellow citizens of this great nation. We have the right to be able to utilize our personal properties as we see fit, within the letter of the law, without fear of being told no first, but having the ability to follow a due process of proper consideration as any other tax-paying citizen in any other municipality in this great state. I believe that our village deserves a vision of moving forward into the future, and a vision of meeting the future needs of the citizens of this generation and future generations. I support a vision of not just residential growth, but also a vision of growth and commerce and in the service needs and maintaining our village. I support the active pursuit of bringing an urgent care facility to the village, repair of the current roads in the village, and the pursuit of bringing new businesses to the village. Except we have enough dollar stores. Somebody had to say it. So my statement is clear and forthright. I first find it an honor to be a candidate for council member of the Village of Holly. A lot of nations have no such position. I promise that if elected, I will take my oath of office as an honor to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States of America. And I promise that I will vote and do everything in my power to protect the best interests of the citizens of the Village of Holly, while at the same time voting for the best interests of the Village of Holly itself. Some people feel that the two issues contradict each other, but I do not. I believe that for the common good of the State of the Union, all elected officials should view both as equally important for the good of all the citizens of this great land. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your vote during this election.
And finally, ladies and gentlemen, we have council member candidate, Mr. Jim Perkins.
Good evening. On the ballot, it'll be a write-in as James Perkins. I want to know when Tim's running for Congress. That was great. After high school, I didn't know what I wanted to do with myself. I didn't have any clue what I was going to do. So I walked into the recruiter's office, raised my right hand, and joined the Army. Great idea. And from that point, it changed the direction of my life. I had to grow up then. And you just have to make new choices. I was a military police officer in the Army, and later on in time, I met my best girl, Julie, and we used to come up here to dinner when we lived in Sylvan Lake, up to the Red Devil, and we thought this would be a great town to raise our children. And we did just that. We've been here for over 20 years now. And I didn't know what to do here in the community. When we take our kids down to the Lakeside Park, and there was a good bit of vandalism going on at the time. So I went to Mr. Sorensen. What was Marv's last name? DPW director. I went to Marv and I said, can I go down and clean all the graffiti off of the park? He said, have at it. So I did that, and next I was cleaning the graffiti off of the tombstones down at the cemetery. Shortly thereafter, the village hired me. I became a contractor for the village from 2005 until 2011. At the same time, I was working for the Michigan State Police as a maintenance man, and I also have I'm a contractor. I've been a contractor here in town for 22 years now. And 2 years ago, we were right here on this very stage, and I was running for village president, and the public of Holly voted for me, which was wonderful. I loved my time as village president, and unfortunately we had an illness in the family, and I stepped down from president. I would like to thank Mr. McKinney for doing a fine job in my absence, and I wasn't done. I was still learning. I'm still learning each and every day, and I'm here today to ask for your vote to continue that process. Thank you.
We have two questions, which I believe we're going to combine into one question for our candidates, and we will just pass the microphone right down the line for these 5 gentlemen.
Once again, 2 questions thrown into one, so do your best to remember them. Yeah, both at once. Here we go. So the first part, how do you plan on working out disagreements with fellow council members? And then, how are you capable of fulfilling a role of communication with Holly's citizens?
Well, I think as far as working things out together with fellow councilmen, it's as with everything else, everybody you meet in your daily life. There's going to be disagreements, but I can always agree to disagree with somebody. A good friend of mine over here, John Louve, we don't agree on a lot, but we do agree on a few core things. And I think you can get around the bad and focus on that good, and then we can work towards those things that we don't have commonality on. And do you want me to do part 2 as well? I think in your day life, you face ups, downs. You go through an entire lifetime every single day that we wake up. And I think that the goal is to end the day better than we started it. And I think as far as council goes, we're going to have bumps. We had bumps while I was village president. We made it through it, and just look forward to the next day.
I need the question again, please.
Okay. Part 1, how do you plan on working out disagreements with fellow council members? And part 2, how are you capable of fulfilling the role of communication with Holly's citizens?
Well, first of all, working together is not a difficult task in reality. Every one of these gentlemen up here, I would virtually call friends. We have talked together, we have worked together in various ways within our community and continue to do that. And that is one of the great things that I see with the current council even that we have, is that there is that ability to disagree agreeably. And as you go through issues that do sometimes have different perspectives to them, that we come out on the end with decisions that are better for our community. And we have had a few of those kinds of issues in the last 2 years, that you have dealt with, and as we continue to deal with them. And some of those can be divisive within our community and can be difficulties for us as council members. But the good thing is that we continue to live in the same community together, we continue to work on all things together, and we come to decisions together. In the end, we all have one vote. Communicating with our community, I know that we hear the challenges with that. We see even with one of the more recent things, we had a boil water order that happened just a few weeks ago in our community. And there are numerous people who said, I didn't hear anything. I know that as a community, as a village, working across the hall from the village offices, I know the methods that they tried to get that information out. We always fail. We always fall short. But when we do, the important thing is to go, what can we do a little bit better the next time? Is it maybe finding a better way to get things out on Facebook? Is it a better way of using Gov delivery to encourage you to participate in receiving text messages or emails through Gov delivery? Is it occasionally an important mailing that needs to go out? There are numerous ways that we can communicate. On a personal level, I think every one of us have been available. I know I enjoyed opportunities when Chris and Dave in the past had done town hall type meetings, or were downtown at the car shows and just met with people. And I talk with lots of people all the time and like to listen to other people's ideas. All of your ideas are valuable, and those ideas also help each of us to make the best decisions for our community as a whole.
I don't need the question. Some of you know, all of you know, I work in the school district, and they have a program of Leader in Me, and it's a very, very interesting program. And one of the things on the 7 steps is to seek first to understand before you're understood. And I think that's something we can all use, especially in government, that understand where your fellow council members, what their thought process is, what they are thinking before jumping in and picking a fight. That's number one. As far as communication to the community, Village does a pretty good job. And it was already mentioned, like there was people who didn't know, but my wife and I, for those who aren't on Facebook in our neighborhood, went on knocking on doors and making phone calls. And that's just part of being in the village of Holly. Because basically, we're all pretty nice people. And it's pretty easy to start a chain. And that's, I think, why one of the reasons why we're all here is to be able to start that communication chain to make sure everybody's okay. Thank you.
You don't have to repeat it. This morning I had breakfast with a very, very close friend of mine. And one of the reasons he's one of my very close friends is he rarely agrees with me. Rarely ever. He's arguing with me all the time. But he is one of my greatest assets. And that's really the way we should look at disagreements within our village, is you can take it from a negative standpoint, or you can stop and listen to what he's saying, and he might have some valid points, and probably does have some valid points. So my key is, just listen to what the other person has to say, and learn to collaborate with them. And as I said, I was the president of a foundation for 17 years. I really took pride in the fact that I really had a lot of high ego people, and somehow or another, we all learned to collaborate with each other. As I used to say, there was a lot of chiefs and no Indians, and somehow or another, we raised a lot of money for brain research, and we're able to sustain ourselves for over 17 years. By way of the second part of your question, I now belong to the Holly Moves, the VFW, the American Legion, and as being part of council, I'll continue joining different organizations because I find it really the best way to reach out to the citizens of Holly. I like talking to people, I like being around people, and that's how I plan on doing it. I'll be reaching out to citizens at every opportunity to hear what they have to say, hear their opinions, even the opinions I do not agree with, and I move forward from that point on. Once again, I would consider it an honor for you to vote for me for council. I will serve you with honesty and integrity and a lot of hard work. Thank you.
Okay, so as to the first part of the question, disagreements amongst council members, how I handle that, well, I'll be honest, when I first got on council, and I think Tom mentioned it earlier, that 90% of the votes are unanimous, so there wasn't a lot of disagreements to begin with, and I was a little disappointed because my natural state is the mediator. I'm the guy who, if somebody disagrees, I don't make any snap judgments, so I'm trying to elicit all that information from every individual in the group so that we can figure out what our differences are and how we can address them and how we can either come to a consensus or agree to disagree. As far as getting more information out to the residents for things that are going on around the village, our website needs to be updated. We have some vehicles for getting that information out that don't work as well as they should, and those things need to be addressed as well. And those are some things that I'm going to be addressing, hopefully in the next 4 years when you vote for me on November 6th.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Once again, in nonpartisan positions running for the Holly Village Council, Mr. Richard Kinnamon, Mr. Rick Powers, Mr. Chris Rankin, Mr. Tim Terpening, and Mr. Jim Perkins. Thank you, gentlemen. We have one more. We have one more speaker. Yes. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, we have one final speaker we would like to invite up here. He will be making just a couple comments. Due to the position, he will not be taking any questions. It is my honor to welcome to the podium, running for Oakland County Circuit Judge, Mr. Jake Cunningham.
All right, well, thank you for all of those who are staying. I appreciate that so much. I'm promised to earn your vote because I'm going to be really quick. I'm running for Oakland County Circuit Court Judge. My name is Jake Cunningham. I am an attorney. I work at the Circuit Courthouse right now for a family division judge. In that capacity, I am a neutral who serves the court. So I work with parties and attorneys working on the cases that my judge presides over. Before working in the family division, where the family division which hears cases of custody, parenting time, support, child abuse and neglect, termination of parental rights, name changes, adoptions, anything dealing with children and families. I was in the general civil court and the business court. So I'm the only candidate that has ever run for this position that has hands-on experience working for the court on all three of the dockets that we have. The circuit court is located, it's the courthouse in Pontiac that services the entire county, so anyone in the county can vote for this position. I currently live in Ferndale, grew up in Bloomfield Township, attended Oakland University and Thomas Cooley Law School in the Auburn Hills campus, so I'm a lifelong Oakland County resident, committed to this community. I am endorsed by all 6 family division judges, other circuit court judges, the chief judge of the probate court, and I'm the only candidate that has those endorsements. My opponent has no sitting current Oakland County Circuit Court judges endorsing him for this position. So the judges have decided that if they're going to share a reputation and a workload with someone, it's going to be me. So with that, I want to say thank you so much. Thank you for staying this late in the evening. Again, Jake Cunningham for Oakland County Circuit Court Judge. We have a campaign Facebook page as well as a website. You can check me out there. If you would like more information, I'll stick around. I've got some flyers. And thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, once we conclude, our candidates will stick around if you have any individual questions for them. I would like to thank you for your attention tonight and for your attendance. It is my pleasure to welcome Mr. George Cullis back to the podium to close the evening for us.
The Chamber of Commerce wants to thank all the candidates that came out this evening. I want to thank you, the audience, for staying for a long evening. I also would like to thank these two young people that helped us out this evening. Team Emily, you did a great job. Mr. Coggins, we thank you. I hope you look at doing this in the future. The Chamber has had a history of having these meet the candidates over the years, and I can't see that stopping anytime soon. One thing to keep in mind, I was really impressed with the 5 candidates we had for Village Council. I think we would be, as a village, served well out of those 5. But keep in mind, you do get to pick 3, so you don't have to just pick one on that group. There's 3 of those that you get to vote for. So again, thank you very much. And the candidates will be up here if you have any questions.